Hello, welcome to a bonus episode of Drinks in a Movie podcast. So I'm putting this one up because it falls into the Bond series, even though this is outside of Eon Productions. This is an episode discussing the 1967 kind of parody comedy film Casino Royale, starring Peter Sellers, Orson Welles, and Ursula Andress, and quite a few others. David Niven, of course, pretty stacked cast. And we recorded this as a part of the other show that I co-host and produce called The Real Generation Gap. So I'm throwing this up on my platform, but we did that on the Real Generation Gap platform. It's a YouTube kind of movie review show where me and this older guy named Fred kind of pick and discuss films. And we thought we would take this one on. So I will say for this, it's accompanied with the video. So if you go into the show description, the link will be there. First thing, click on the link and go ahead and watch this on the Real Generation Gap YouTube channel and like and subscribe and all that good stuff. We will eventually put out another bonus episode as well, but that'll be a few weeks from now. So anyway, hope you enjoy the episode. Go check out Real Generation Gap. Cheers. Hi, welcome to the Real Generation Gap. I'm Rudy Ruiz.
I'm Fred Satilli.
And today we're going to be discussing the 1967 Casino Royale, which was a non-Eon production parody of the James Bond films. I guess I'll give a little bit of context here before we jump into this. I've been, as you know, been watching all the Bond films from the very beginning going on, so I knew I'd have to cover this one, even
27,
though...
right?
27 of them, yeah. 27. That's including this and Never Say Never Again.
That's a binge watch of a lifetime.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I think.
I'm like 2-3 weeks in. But this one is interesting because Casino Royale was actually the very first Ian Fleming novel, but they never made it into a movie. The first film, as you know, is Dr. No from 1962, which I believe was the sixth novel. But I guess the way the story goes is somewhere in the 50s, people were making offers for the rights to his first novel. And who was it? A director, producer, Gregory Radoff, I guess, got the optioned it for several months. And then they sold it, or not sold it, but they made the CBS television episode as part of a show called Climax.
Oh, that's the Barry Nelson thing?
Barry Nelson and Peter Lorre as Le Chiffre. So I guess we can say, as far as we know, that's the first kind of Bond
ever
on screen.
Yeah, Barry Nelson.
Yeah.
The first, yeah.
In that show, Climax.
What year? You said it was 57?
54.
54.
Yeah, 54 is what I read. Because the novel was, I think a couple years prior to that when it first came out. And then, time goes on, and eventually the rights were sold to Charles Feldman, who, in I think 1961, who I think from what I understand, wanted to do a serious Bond movie, but by this point, Albert Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, Eon Productions, they were doing their thing. They had Connery. We are 4 movies in at this point, and he couldn't do it. They have the rights. So only they are making their Bond movies.
Right.
So this was kind of non-canon, unofficial.
Right up until Thunderball.
So he goes and decides, all right, we're going to make this kind of comedy parody version of it, which is kind of interesting too, because it's funny how quickly Bond took off. I mean, that first movie was made for only $1 million. And then they kept growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger. By the time Goldfinger came out, big, phenomenon. They're doing all these Bond clones and shows, rip-offs and other movies.
Yeah, Our Man Flint.
Mm-hmm, yeah. All kinds of, that was kind of the train to be on, was the spy, espionage.
Well, it was the beginning of the Cold War. The whole country. We had TV shows like Get Smart. Right?
Yeah.
Goofy.
And that would have been like Mission Impossible, I think, was starting too, right? In the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah.
Napoleon Solo and Ilya Kuryakin.
Okay.
Rudy, they even had action figures.
Did they really?
Of these guys, yeah.
Okay. So I felt, let's do the due diligence and I'll watch this movie as kind of a bonus. And I know you like a lot of these older comedies, so I'm like, let me pitch it. And ironically, because oftentimes, sometimes you'll throw an older comedy at me and I'm not really feeling it.
Right.
And I know you appreciate it, but for me, it just doesn't land. And, I picked this one. And I'm seeing it for the first time.
Nice try.
And, I'll say right here's my review. This movie sucks.
Yeah.
It is not funny. It's not funny. I'm sorry I put you through it.
And I actually did watch it again, even because I wanted to forget it.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine you probably saw when it came out. Were you watching it?
I've seen it a couple times before, but oh man. If you're making a James Bond movie with Woody Allen in it, it's not going to be good.
I think he could have potentially been the funniest part of it. I think he almost was for me. But it's just
thought there was a funny part?
Funny.
Wait a second.
No, okay, like almost could have been maybe, but it just doesn't.
Nice qualification.
The only part that made me chuckle a little bit was when David Niven. I don't even remember what's happening, but he's at the Scottish house and that lady's trying to come on to him and they do that stupid thing where they got to pick up these big stone balls.
Right.
That wasn't funny, but she would grab this
whistling.
She would grab this horn and like put it to her mouth and it would play this like crazy
jazz riff.
Yeah. Which I will say the one positive I have is the soundtrack. Now it's not John Barry, but it's Herb Alpert in the Tijuana Brass. And there's a song by Dusty Springfield, but the jazzy music,
that was
the trumpet
a hit.
score,
that was a hit. And Herb Alpert had a hit with the song Casino Royale.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's I guess I'll say it anyway. At that time, I was 10 years old, and I played the trumpet.
Okay,
I had been playing it for 2 years, and I had my regular lessons. But all those songs like "The Lonely Bull" and "Tijuana Taxi," I was like playing those on the trumpet. So it wasn't long till I discovered the drums and threw the trumpet out the window, but I played those Herb Alpert songs, and Herb Alpert was really huge. And A&M Records that just produced like hundreds and hundreds of hits. The A is Alpert in A&M. So that guy really had a career that's hard to even know about. All this behind the scenes stuff and everything, but yet he performed. It wasn't like, well, he just went into executive production and, no, he was still touring. And I don't know. I mean, since I've been in California, he like played at the Hollywood Bowl. I've heard him criticized and everything, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. I mean, was this movie funny at the time or no? Like even when you first saw it, did you laugh or was it just lame?
Different comedy standard then.
Yeah.
Things were goofier.
Yeah, that's what I mean though. Like even by that time standard, was it?
But I do think Scottish is funny, and all the thing where they use the Scottish, I guess, brogue, and they say the words and they all sound strange and everything like that. Just speaking Scottish is funny. They had this thing on Saturday Night Live. If it's not Scottish, it's crap.
Welcome to All Things Scottish. Our slogan is, if it's no Scottish, it's crap!
Right?
Okay.
And that's how they are, and that's what they do. And the great part of them is they think that is English.
Okay.
Like they think you have an accent.
Right.
And they'll tell you that. They're all drinking Newcastle and talking in a way that you can't possibly understand what they're saying. A lot of the Irish are like that too. Like if you like meet like Northern Irish mob people or whatever, they're using expressions that you don't understand. They're saying words that you don't understand. Their words have different meanings than what you think the meaning of that word is. It's interesting how there are people in Wales that still speak Welsh. And the signs are in Welsh. So it's an interesting part of the world that way because it's tiny, but there's lots of cultures.
Right.
There's dialects that are really far. Somebody from, even the north of Great Britain is not going to sound like a Londoner at all.
Right.
One of my favorite lines or whatever is Brunze Arun. That means Newcastle Brown Ale all around. The guy will come in the saloon and say, Brunze Arun, and what?
Yeah.
So the Scottish part, when she was talking about the family and how they had these traditions and they were drinking to the laird, and it was like he had like nothing but daughters, that kind of thing. That was kind of funny to me because of the Scottish.
Right.
But anyway.
Right. I'm going to give a super quick synopsis. This is right off IMDb just because, I don't care much. In an early spy spoof, aging Sir James Bond, played by David Niven, comes out of retirement to take on Smersh. So I will say I was interested in seeing this. Not, obviously, as we've been talking, I've been going through the Bond movies, and I'm like, all right, in 1967, they were already doing a parody of it. The cast is pretty stacked. Peter Sellers, David Niven, Woody Allen, Orson Welles. We even get Ursula Andress, who was Honey Rider in Dr. No.
Right.
Like, all right, this is pretty cool. John Huston's one of the directors. But then you realize, William Holden's in it for a second. I forgot all about that.
These guys, John Huston, it's like you recognize him, but you don't.
Yeah.
I just sort of, it doesn't, you're not focused on it that much,
Yeah. So I'm thinking,
but look, that Dahlia Lavi was quite lovely, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, this might be all right. Should be fine. And it's really a bit of a mess. I mean, I'm looking at the credits and I'm like, we got, 6 directors here. Val Guest, Ken Hughes, John Huston, Joseph McGrath, Robert Parrish, Richard Talmadge, and 10 different writers too. So immediately when I'm seeing that in the credits, I'm like, oh, okay,
they tried.
That could be neat, but it definitely isn't. It's a mess. And apparently Peter Sellers got fired partway through the movie and didn't even get to finish because in the little bit of research I've done, I guess he was just a complete,
impossible to deal
good
with
person to work with on there and was just being really terrible. And him and Orson Welles didn't get along. And apparently their whole, Baccarat scene, they weren't even in the same room because he didn't want to be with them. Yeah. They just shot them
they
separately.
filmed those back and forth on different days.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is so weird.
Yeah.
Because I always believe in the magic of the movie. So
Yeah.
I think that it's really there and it's really happening. Like in the case you're talking about, even the people in the background aren't even there that day.
Yeah. And it's interesting because as I'm watching this, and we've done a couple Peter Sellers comedies on here. I've seen a couple
I like
others
Peter
outside of
Sellers.
this. Yeah. When his scenes do come up, which did seem a little limited, now it makes sense because I thought he was going to be in it a lot more. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, he's not really, it doesn't seem like he's parodying the character. It seems like he's just trying to play Bond. And in my research, it turns out that he didn't want this to be a comedy. Apparently he wanted the part. He wanted to be Bond. And part of why he was being so troublesome is because he would play it serious. And not lean into the funny and everyone else. And so they weren't in agreement on that. So reading that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Because, in no point did I feel like he was trying to be funny. It completely felt like
there's no
he was
continuity.
Just doing
There's
Bond.
no continuity. The story doesn't have good continuity.
Yeah.
All the Mata Hari stuff, and I did think it was hilarious that Mata Hari's daughter, the James Bond was the father, so she was Mata Bond.
Right. Yeah.
It's so stupid.
It's not a good movie.
It was the era when everybody had an Elvis Presley style bedroom. They always had those bedrooms with diamond tufted furniture and everything sort of looks like a whorehouse,
anyway. Very, very extravagant.
And that extended even into the custom van era. People outfitted custom vans back then with those kind of over to plush interiors.
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous.
One other thing I'll bring up is this is before this in terms of the actual, Eon Productions James Bond. We had Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball. So You Only Live Twice came out 2 months after this film. So this was in between. And funny enough, we mentioned those other 4 films. This movie, sadly, had a bigger budget than all 4 of the first movies combined, which is really sad. It's so money doesn't equal good movies.
That's
people.
for sure. That's for sure.
Not by a long shot. As we can see in the Russo brothers did that Netflix movie, The Electric State, which apparently was $300 or $400 million, and apparently it's not good at all.
Well, don't even say Snow White, right?
Oh man, that has 1.4 stars on IMDb. I never in my life have seen a movie that low. It's wild. And they're screwed, as they should be. Hopefully they get it now.
Maybe you'll learn.
Yeah,
this is how you learn.
Yeah. But anyway, I just had to bring that up.
But the movie did have the hit song by Burt Bacharach, right? That was The Look of Love, sung by Dusty Springfield. That was a hit on the radio.
Right.
So it was interesting that there were some good, there were good elements or stuff in there.
Yeah, and funny enough, it was nominated for an Oscar, Best Original Song for The Look of Love. So, yeah, it happens.
That's a dynamite hit. Well, you just take any pile and put a dynamite hit in it.
Yeah.
You got a dynamite hit in a pile.
Yeah.
And they did. So I don't know. But one of the things I liked, though, was because I really like the current one, the one that's about 10 years old of Casino Royale. Really like it.
Yeah, almost 20 years old. That was 2006.
Is that true?
Yeah, 19 years old.
I'm going to die soon. I really am. It's going to be a total shock to me. I'm like, what? It's bad enough looking in the mirror. Anyway, that's when I was introduced to Vesper Lind. I didn't even remember the name because they don't say it in this movie too much, right? Whereas in the other one, it's really stressed because Bond loves Vesper.
Yeah.
And he makes you haven't seen that one yet?
I have. That one I have seen.
Yeah, that's even like the code name, right? Like the password or whatever, it's Vesper. So to me, then when I saw this and I was like, oh, well, that's authentic. Like at least they had that. So few elements of Casino Royale were in this Casino Royale.
And it seems like when they get to the point...
I think, what I think? Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was on TV during this time, and there was that kind of humor or something. Yeah. And none of that stuff ever landed either, with the exception of Artie Johnson. You probably don't know this, but Artie Johnson used to dress up with a Nazi helmet, and he had a cigarette, and he would say something at the end of the show. Okay. And the Laugh-In was on back-to-back with I Love Lucy, and it was like getting better ratings, like it was knocking I Love Lucy off the top spot. And one of the things, he takes a cigarette and he says, "Good night, Lucy." And that was genuinely funny. Yeah. Otherwise, the rest of it, unbelievably bad.
Very interesting.
So rating-wise, I rate it forget it.
I like that, yeah.
I'm glad that you at least reviewed it. You can't know until you watch. Yeah, but that movie, all the way through, you're waiting for something good to happen, but it never happens.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I'll give it a 2. You don't need to watch it. If you need a James Bond parody, then look no further than Austin Powers. Yeah. They nailed it, man. They completely nailed it.
Right.
Mike Myers
Way better.
and co. Yeah.
Way better.
And I was curious. I'm like, all right, what does a parody of 60s Bond look like that was also made in the 60s? Should be interesting. And it's not interesting at all. It's a waste of 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's longer than most of the Bond movies, which is also frustrating.
They're long. Bond movies are long. Yeah. But I'll also be generous with the 2 because of the look of love. It's the one redeeming factor. Now the song is ruined for me. That's all we have to say. This is one. Don't leave a comment. Don't subscribe. Don't give us a thumbs down on this one. We'll do a really good one coming up. Promise.